Well, good morning. It's good to be anywhere warm. It's mornings like this, Don, that I wake up and I'm glad I'm not a cow, and I'm glad their hooves are too big to press my doorbell. Or they'd be. I had to learn that a long time ago. It's just because somebody taught me a long time ago about being a cow farmer. It's just because you don't want to be out there doesn't mean that they can't. They're made differently than we are, and none of us have a 55-gallon furnace inside of us, so we have to depend on something else. But man, it really changed, didn't it? Taylor is about to get on an airplane in 2 hours on the other side of the world. It's 80 degrees where she's at, and it's midnight. So it was 92 today, so she's getting ready to have a 90-degree swing in about 24 hours. So that's going to be once she steps onto the airplane and steps off. The next air she breathes will be about 100 degrees cooler than what she's breathing right now. But it'll be American air, and it'll be air. it'll be air in the presence of her daddy, and that'll be a good time for all of us. So we appreciate your prayers for her. It's been an awesome time that she's had there. Sandy is in Evansville this morning. She's at St. Mary's Hospital with her mom. She's been in the hospital all week with pneumonia, and they're hoping to transfer her back to her home today. And so we had to ship her over ahead of the storm so she could be snowed in over there with her mom in case she needed her. So a little disjointed this morning, and so we're all four of us are in 4 different locations. So that's kind of different for me. But we are glad to be here, and we're glad that you're here, and we hope that your new year is going well. It's always good to get at least 1 week of school under our belt. And now the question, I guess, is going to be on everybody's mind. It takes me back to the days when I worked at the radio station, and the phone would ring off the hook on days like this. Is there going to be school? 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 And even after I started announcing it, Kevin, they kept calling, and that's probably why. And sometimes it's kind of been the story of my life. They actually gave me the award of "We Keep Talking and Nobody's Listening" award, and I've had that kind of hanging on my wall my whole life. So anyway, but we got 1 week in, and so now we're in our second week of the sermon series that we began last week. And I told you last week as we began this and kind of planted this question in your hearts to be thinking about, that we were going to camp out here for about 3 weeks, because we're getting ready to drive that 9-week stretch to Easter and start a whole new campaign. But before we get there, we just wanted to take some time. It was my prayer that all of us would take some time and just think about what breaks our heart. What is it that we think about a lot? We talked last week about the fact that this is the season of self-improvement, and that's a good thing. We started our Growing Academy on Wednesday night, and we had a whole parking lot full of people, and there was all kinds of folks here, and I just noticed everybody was sitting in this room, and Keith Bennett is teaching the Daniel plan, which is an exercise and spiritual and a whole new, and it's awesome. It's an awesome plan if you haven't ever checked it out or read the book. But I just noticed how many folks kind of jumped up and migrated toward that class, and I'm thinking, that's where we are. It's a season of self-improvement. We kind of get to the end of the year, and we Christmas is Christmas, right? I had to go to the doctor this week, and I'm sitting there as I'm driving in going, I got to get on that scale. And man, peanut butter fudge is my weakness, and all those goodies that I've been eating, and all the barbecue and the ham and the cheese balls, and I just know that thing is going to lie to me and tell me that I'm so much bigger than I really feel like I am. And so that's kind of the question that gets on our mind. When Christmas is over and it's time to wrap it up and it's time to get into a new year, we start asking ourselves those questions. How can I be slimmer? What can I do to be smarter in 2016? How can I get out of debt? How can I make more money? What can I do? And all of those things are great, okay, because all of those things make you better. All of those things are good things, and we should do those things, and those things are important. We need to be good stewards of what God has given us. If He's given you something to take care of, if He's given you health, if He's given you a body, and He has, then you need to be a good steward of it. You need to take care of that. We need to exercise. We need to eat right. But we discovered last week that there's a bigger, broader question. Because it's not just self-improvement so that we will be better. There's more to it than that. There's more to it than just for ourselves. And here's the thing about this question. Some of you may be here today because somebody else asked this question. Some of you, and I don't even know this, some of you may be able to look around this room and see somebody that is here today, that is a part of this church today, because you asked this question. Some of you 17 years ago asked this question. 17 years ago, 18 years ago, back in 97, asked this question. And you looked around and said, the church that we're a part of and the churches that we see in this community and the churches that are not growing. They're not reaching people. They're not doing, people who are not in church don't want to come to these churches because there's 40 of them around there and none of them are growing. And it broke your heart. It broke your heart. Some of you guys that are here today, it broke your heart because you couldn't get people to come to church that you were attending. And you said, we're going to do something different. We're going to start something new. We're going to try something that nobody else is doing. And you went to the gym at Pleasant Ridge School and started something new because you looked around at the lost people and it broke your heart. And Living Faith is here today as a result of that. Somebody may be here today. Somebody may have made the decision to accept Christ. And I know there's lots of them. And you know there's lots of them. So let me ask you this question. What if you hadn't done it? What if you hadn't done it? What if you had just said, I got it. I know Jesus. He loves me and I love Him. I'll just go to church when I'm home and the rest of the time I'll just go fishing. I'm not going to, we got air conditioner here. The gym's hot. We're just going to stay here where it's comfortable. What if you hadn't done it? Think about that for just a minute. Think about that. Some of you have been in need and have received help because somebody asked that question. Somebody else saw something. They saw a need and it broke their heart and they made a difference. And they made a difference in your life. All of us have benefited from the fact that someone somewhere decided to look around and make a difference. Over 100 years ago, in the late 1800s, people went to church in my community and crossed the river. They would get in boats and they would go to Provo, to Monticello to church. And some of them would get in boats and they would go to Salem and Logansport. And some of them would probably roll up their boots and cross the Thoroughfare Creek or boat across it when there were no bridges and would go to Slady Creek. But there was no church in our community. So back in the late 1800s, a group of people looked around and said, there's no church in our community. And it broke their heart. And so they sacrificed all that they could pull together, and they met in a little old schoolhouse, and they established New Harmony Baptist Church. And I'm standing here today because the fact that there was no church in that little community over 100 years ago broke someone's heart. And they made the decision to do something more, to do something bigger, to plant a seed, to make something happen. We shared with you last week this question. And after we ask ourselves this question, what breaks our heart, it leads us to a bigger question. What do I do about it? And how do I even know what to do? How do I even know what to do? We shared last week the story of Nehemiah. If you've never read that story, I challenge you, go back and read the story of Nehemiah. When Nehemiah asked what was going on back in his homeland of Jerusalem, back what was going on in Judah, they told him that the walls were broken down and that the gates had been burned with fire. And he sat down and he wept. It broke Nehemiah's heart. He was deeply affected. So we introduced this question to ourselves last week. What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? When you look around your community, when I look around our community, we have a lot of needs. We have a lot of needs. There's 20,000 people in this county that are not in church. Today, that's about 22,000, maybe a little more. 20,000 plus people are not in church right now. When you look around our country, you get staggered by the needs that are there. And when you look around the world, I can't wait to sit with Taylor. Okay, I cannot wait to sit with her because she spent 14 days in another land. She spent 14 days on the other side of the world, immersed in a culture, immersed in a place that is not like where she's grown up. And so for 20 years, all she's really known is Kentucky. And for a lot of years, all she really knew was Ohio County. And so I've taken her to different places, and we've traveled, and we've gone. But this is the farthest, longest, life-changing trip that she's ever been on. And I can't wait. But I've already communicated with her. We text every day. And some of the things that she tells me is this, Daddy, the mass amount of people. The mass amount of people. And that equates to the massive amount of lostness. And when we really look at the needs of our community, the needs of our country, the needs of our world, it can be overwhelming. I mean, what do we do with all these needs? What do we do with all of it? In a lot of cases, you can't change the world. Maybe God is not given you that ability to change the world. But let me tell you something. He has given you the ability, all of us, to change somebody's world. He has given us the ability to change somebody's world. When we are obedient, to do what He's called us to do, we can change somebody's world. What breaks your heart? And what is that one thing? You know, there's a lot of things we hear about. There's a lot of needs that we get confronted with every day. I mean, if you watch TV, if you're on social media, if you're in life, if you're doing those things, you hear it, you see it. And sometimes when you hear it and you see it, you go, oh, that's too bad. Oh, I hate seeing that. That just hurts me when I see it. But what is it that when you see it, just, man, you just can't get that image out of your head. You just can't turn it off. You just can't. You wake up at night and that's what you see. What is that thing that just eats at you, that just tears at you, that just gets in your head and in your heart and just grabs and tugs? See, here's a way to kind of put this into perspective. When you come to the end of your life, what do you want to be remembered for? Okay? When you come to the end of your life, what would you like to be remembered? Ask these questions to yourself. At the end of my life, what would I want people to thank me for? You know, when I was in high school, when I was young, I was not a stick and ball kind of a person, and I really wasn't an athletic person, as you can probably tell. I'm still not. This wasn't my thing. And so sports and me just didn't jive, and PE was not my class, and it was just like, ugh. And so but there was something that was kind of interesting because I found the FFA, and I could memorize things and I could talk, and I didn't really know that I could talk because I was so shy. The lady that's cut my hair since I was like 4 years old, she still teases me. She said, I just can't believe that you're a preacher. She said, when you were like 5, she said, I would have to keep raising your head up. Look at me, because you were so shy, so bashful. But I remember when they handed me the FFA creed in high school, my freshman year, they handed it to me and said, memorize this. And I was like, oh, I can do that. I can do it. I remember the Gettysburg Address in 5th grade, so I'm in 9th grade now. This is no problem. It's just 5 big sentences. It's a whole page, but I can get this down. And I remember doing that, and I remember coming in, it's like I had it. And we were meeting in the ag shop, and I still teach there now, but back then there was no air conditioner in there, so it was just smoking hot in August. And I remember my ag teacher, Mr. Hackett, said, does anybody have the creed memorized? And I said, I do. And so I stand up there in the shop, and I start saying the creed, and then the door opens in the shop, and Mr. Freeman was our principal. He walks in, puts his leg up on the big trash can down in the ag shop, and he's listening to me give the creed. And I'm looking at him out of the corner of my eye, and I'm looking at Mr. Hackett and all these kids, and I'm saying this creed, and I just said it. Just went right through it. And it was like, well, I can do this. And what happened is I did that in high school, and then I went to college, and when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, I thought, I bet there's other guys out there like me. I bet there's other people out there like me that don't do sports and don't do other things, and I bet they grew up on a farm like I did, and they would like to, and I just would like to kind of give my life to that. This organization has helped me so much. It's changed my life. It's made an impact on me, and I want to turn that around, and I want to give my life back to those young people, to those kids, and so you just do it. And then it becomes a job. And then it just becomes a job, and you just go do it every day. And sometimes you do it every day, and you don't even realize what you're doing and what you're saying and whether it even matters. And God did something for me that was, at the time, it was not a blessing at all for me, because if He would have told me this was a blessing, I'd have been like, no, that's not a blessing. I've tried every way I could to prevent this from happening, but we had this little issue, and we had this numbers crisis kind of a thing, and the site-based council met, and they cut my teaching position. And so I was without a job. My job was eliminated. It was just gone. Just one day, I'm just sitting there in a meeting, and they just voted, and it's like, so you don't have a job anymore. You're not doing what you do anymore. And I'm like, wow, God, did you hear this? Were you there? Were you hearing? Were you listening? And He's like, yeah, just hang on. And then the results from that were just really amazing. Somebody asked me, they said, what's it been like to go through that process? I said, the only way I can describe it is this. It's like I got to attend my own funeral. I said, because I gave 20 years of my life to a group of kids, and you don't even know if you did any good or if you made any difference or if you made any impact. I said, but the cool thing about it is that I've been able to listen to all of this stuff that they've come back. And it's like I've come to the end of my career and I've been able to hear what they thank me for. And I'm like, if this is where it ends, I'm good with that because I've done what I've been called to do. And then God said, now you get it, and here's your job back. What breaks your heart? What do you want to be remembered for when you come to the end of your life? See, when you come to the end of your life, we don't all get to hear our own funerals. We don't all get to hear what people think of us. But when we come to the end of our life, when we begin to do this, we begin to want to think about what perspective we would have. Because when we start thinking about this, when we start thinking about what we want to be thanked for, when we start really thinking about what we would want to be remembered for, then that creates a little tension in us. Okay, that creates a little tension in us because of the question. Okay, because of the question, what breaks my heart? Because you realize that if you answer that question, you realize when you answer that question. I remember in 1996 when I was called to pastor, and Sandy and I had to sit and we had to make the decision as to whether or not we were going to do this. Because it was very obvious that he was not calling me to full-time vocational ministry. He was going to leave me in the classroom and he was going to require me to pastor a church. So I was adding another full-time job. And we had to wrestle with that decision. We had to go through that process. And when we all go through that, we realize it makes us a little bit hesitant. Because we realize when we decide to move, even in a small way, when we decide we're going to take one step towards something that really breaks our heart, that really, really affects us, that it's going to cost us something. It's going to cost us some time. It's going to cost us some money. It's going to require some missed opportunity in some other area of our life. It may even require you to give up some time from your family. I can't tell you in 20 years how many times I've had to say, I'm not going to make it home tonight. Will you be home? No, I won't be home for supper. I've got to go to the hospital. Will you be home for? No, I won't be there. I got to do this. Are you going to? No, I won't. I won't be able to make that. No, I can't do that. No, I can't go. How many times I've had to look at my girls and say, I can't be. I'll be there for a minute, or I'll try to pull through. And if you just make sure you look and see me, because I've got to go. And over and over and over again, there's requirements. There's requirements, and that's hard for us. That is hard for us. Because ultimately we realize that if we're going to do something about what breaks our heart, if we're going to do something about that is going to cost us some life. It is going to cost us some life. And that's a problem for us. Because by nature, by human nature, who we are life preservers. We are life preservers. I don't want to give my life away. I want to save my life. I don't want to risk my life. I have a seat belt. I have airbags, okay? I have all of these things. We have security systems. We do all of these things to preserve and protect our lives because it becomes all about me. When I begin to focus on what breaks my heart, when I begin to focus on what I need to do for others, it threatens my life. And it's a real tension. It's a real tension. And it will cost us something. And then Jesus comes along. And then Jesus comes along, and this is what he says to us, okay? Now, I'm going to start with a paraphrase, and then we're going to look at what he actually said. And this is a quote from Andy Stanley. He said it better than I can say it, so I can't say it any better, but this is what he says. Whoever devotes themselves to themselves will have nothing but themselves to show for themselves. Now think about that. That's not what Jesus said exactly, but just keep on, hang on to that. Whoever devotes themselves to themselves will have nothing but themselves to show for themselves in the end. Jesus was constantly surrounded by crowds. Everywhere he went, crowds. Crowds. And who wouldn't want to be around Jesus? I mean, he fed you, he healed you, he had good words to say. And so everybody, when they heard Jesus was coming, let's be close to Jesus. So everywhere he went, there were smelly people, sick people, hungry people, needy people, all these people. And what did they all want to do? Okay, think about this. All these hungry, and we didn't even have deodorant back then, and all these people crowding around, and all of them wanting to touch him. Okay? And he couldn't jump in an Escalade and just get zipped away. I mean, he could get on a donkey. It's like, hey, Jesus, you're going the same speed we're walking, man. So he couldn't get away. So what he would do is sometimes he would just kind of sneak away onto a mountainside somewhere. And a lot of times he would just get in a boat because they couldn't, he could walk on water, but they couldn't. So he'd get on a boat and just kind of get out in the water, right? And just get away from the crowd so he could be with his guys. And so there's always people crowding around Jesus. And here's this is a great story. Luke tells us this story in chapter 14, and it begins in verse 25. And it's one of those times that there's large crowds traveling with Jesus. And it says turning to them, but when you listen to what he says, it's almost like he turned on them. Because all these crowds are pressing around. You think about all these smelly, needy, hungry, sick people that are always around him. And then this is what he says to them. If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And you think, whoa, Jesus, come on, easy. That's a strong word. That's a strong word. Hate. I mean, wait a minute. What's he talking about? What's he mean? Hate your mom and dad and brothers and sisters? That's a strong word. Well, he's not talking about hate the emotion. All right, if we look at Jesus' teaching, he's very clear about what he teaches. And if we look at his teaching, we realize that hate the emotion is something different. And he teaches us that we're not to hate people. And if we hate people in that way, and if we have the emotion of hate, then we are not a true follower of Jesus. Is that me? What he's talking about is allowing Jesus to be the decision maker. Allowing him to be the decision maker and the most important person in your life. What he's using here is called a hyperbole. Okay, it's an exaggeration, it's an overstatement, it's a magnification. Jesus used this to get his point across. He was like, look, guys, you all can hang out with me all you want. I'll feed you, love you, whatever I need to do for you. But you can't really be my disciple unless you allow me to control your life. And that's what he's talking about. Who is going to be in control of your life? Who is calling the shots? Because that's what he says. Verse 27, anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. He cannot be my disciple. Because to be someone's disciple is to say, I'm following them. I am following that person. And Jesus says, you have to follow me. And Jesus says, I know you guys are following me around. Everywhere I go. Everywhere I go, there's people. And everywhere I go, you go. But you can't really be my disciple unless you decide who is going to be in charge. And then he asked the question, who is going to be the Lord of your life? This is what he's saying to them. This is the point that he's trying to get. Who is going to be the Lord of your life? To hate your own life doesn't mean the emotion. It doesn't mean, I hate my life is terrible and all. No, that's not what he's talking about. What he's talking about is not to feel bad about your life, but it means that you're going to submit your life, okay? Your life is to be submitted to him, to allow him to be in control. Submitting your life to his will. And so this is the season of self-improvement. This is the season of self-improvement. But what we discover here is that the essence of following Jesus, is not about self-improvement, but it's about self-denial. Okay? The essence of following Jesus is not about self-improvement, but it's more about self-denial. And that is hard for us. That is so hard for us. It's hard for Americans because we have a society that is based on self-improvement. We have a society that is our economy is based on self-improvement. Our educational goals and everything is based on self-improvement. We teach that to our kids. Even Christian people, we find ourselves, what are you going to do for a living? And where are you going to live? And what's your house going to look like? And what kind of car are you going to drive? And all these things are all about improving you. It's all about self-improvement. It's just the whole culture that we live in. And Jesus says, I'm not against you being the best you. I'm not against you being the best you can be. Jesus says, I'm not against you taking care of your body. I'm not against you being healthy. I'm not against you being out of debt. But if you're going to be my follower, then that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to follow me because I am calling the shots. Mama ain't calling the shots. Your daddy's not calling the shots. Your kids aren't calling the shots. Your spouse is not calling the shots. I am calling the shots. And that's when he just puts it to him and says, you cannot be my disciple if you're not going to allow me to be the Lord of your life. You can be my traveling buddy. You can hang out. You can eat the free food. But you cannot be my disciple. You are not my disciple until you are ready to die to yourself and say yes to me. That's pretty strong words, isn't it? You cannot be my disciple until you are ready to take up your cross, till you are ready to die to yourself and submit to me. So all the folks at that point that were kind of hanging out for the free food just went and took a yoga class, right? See, it gets tougher, doesn't it? Just hang on. Jesus is coming to a place where he's saying, I have something better for you. I have something better for you, but you're going to have to learn to deny yourself before you can experience it. You're going to have to learn to deny yourself before you can experience it. We have another occasion in Mark chapter 8. Mark chapter 8 and verse 34, he called the crowd to him along with his disciples. And he says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. And then he goes on. For whoever wants to save their life, and that's what we do, isn't it? Because we're life savers. And you know you are so sweet. We're life savers. We're life preservers. Whoever wants to save their life will ultimately lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. Wow. When it becomes all about me and life becomes all about my success, when life becomes all about my goals, ultimately, you lose it. But whoever loses their life for me, he's not talking here about martyrdom. Okay? He's not talking about going out and taking a bullet. That's what a lot of Christians have. Okay? A lot of Christians have been asked by God to give of their physical bodies, to give of their physical lives for the cause. But that's not what Jesus is referring to. He's talking about his way and not our way. That Jesus has become the supreme authority of my life over everything, including myself. It's about submitting our lives totally and completely to him. It's about saying, Jesus, you know what's best for me, and so whatever you say, I will follow you. Here's something that we all need to consider. As long as we are all about ourselves, we can never be about what Jesus wants us to be. It'll never happen. It'll never happen. Jesus says if you only live for yourself when you get to the end of your life, it's a total loss. If you do everything to try to save your life when you get to the end of your life, you have nothing. It's a loss. It's a loss. If you only live for yourself when you get to the end of it, you have nothing to show for yourself but yourself. And trust me, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. You are not enough. Grab this now. You are not enough for you to live for. You are not enough for you to live for. There's more than that. There's more to you than a body, and there's more to you than a balance sheet. There is more to you than self-improvement. You want to get better? Great. But there's a bigger reason that you do it for. There's a better reason that you do it for. And you have been invited. You have been invited with an invitation to significance. And that is an invitation to step outside of yourself. It's an invitation for someone at the end of your life to say, thank you. At the end of your life, for someone to say, thank you. If it wasn't for you, I would have never found Christ. If it wasn't for you, I would have never found Him. When Taylor filled out her Christmas list, because her father is a list person, I said, I need a list of things that you need before you take this trip. I need to know some things that you need if there's not everything that you already have, whatever you need. And being the person that she is, on the top of her list was a Bible. She said, I want a small Bible to travel with me, something that's inconspicuous and something that I can have with me. And so she told me the translation that she wanted that was the one that they use and the thing that would be the best. And so I went to Lifeway the day before Christmas Eve, which is always what I do. And so I go in and I'm like, okay, well, this is what I need. And so we go back and so she says, I got one. And I was like, great. And so it's an awesome choice. So it's this one. And as soon as I picked it up, it was perfect. It was the right size, and it was leather, and it had this thing, and you couldn't really tell that it was a Bible. And I said that's kind of what you needed, something inconspicuous in that culture. But the cover of it was pink. And Taylor's not a pink person. She's a girl, but she's not pink. She don't like pink. And I knew that, and I was like, I hate to buy the child a pink Bible because she doesn't like pink, and this is the only one I've got, and here it is. It's Christmas Eve. That's sorry. Here you go. So we buy it. And so she opens it on Christmas morning, and she said, oh, it's perfect. And I said, Taylor, it's pink, okay? And I know that you don't like pink. I said, but I'm going to give you two options. I said, option one, we will go, okay? We will go and we will get another one that you like. I said, or this is the bigger thing. I said, I want you to take that with you and use it as your traveling Bible, and I want you to use it to witness, read, whatever. I said, but I'm going to pray that at the end of your trip that someone will present themselves to you, and I said that God will share with you that that's their Bible, okay? And I want you to give it to them, and I want you to leave it there. And if you want one like it or a different color, then later on we will get it for you when you return. And the other morning at 2 a.m., my phone buzzed on the side of my bed, and my phone buzzing wakes me up, okay? And especially when your child is on the other side of the world, and I know it's daytime there. And so I grab my phone, and it says, Daddy, the Bible you gave me is in the hands of a college student named Manzi. She is a Hindu, but she really wants to learn more about Jesus. Thank you for giving me that, Daddy. I prayed right before I sat next to her that I could give it to someone. God is awesome. Taylor's a college student. When I was her age, I was at home chasing deer and ducks and rabbits. The furthest thing from my mind was going on the other side of the world, praying for an opportunity to place the Word of God in the hands of a person who is a non-believer. You see, when we decide to try to live outside of ourselves and look beyond ourselves, Jesus invites us. He was inviting His audience then, and He invites us today to live a life of purpose. To live a life of purpose. And for a young person to hear that word, it's really hard to hear. And I understand that because I have been there. And when we're young and when we're 18, when we're 19, when we're in high school, when we're in college, then we look at our lives from the front end, and this is what we say to ourselves. I'm going to get a good job, and I'm going to get me a new truck, and I'm going to get me a car, I'm going to get a house, and I'm going to get me a cool boat, and I'm going to get another duck boat, and I'm going to get a Benelli, and then I'm going to get a real pretty girlfriend, and people are going to look at her and say, there must be more to him than what we see because she's really hot, okay? That's what's in our head. That's what we're thinking about when we're in high school and when we're in college. And Jesus invites us to live a life of purpose. Because what happens is it all becomes about stuff. If it's all about us, then it all becomes about our stuff. And when it's all about cars, clothes, girlfriends, boyfriends, guns, boats, houses, When it all becomes about that, this is what happens when you get all the stuff. When you get all the stuff, you look at all the stuff and say, does this stuff mean anything? I wonder how many people stood in line last night to buy a lottery ticket, thinking that that ticket, thinking that that ticket was the ticket to their happiness, and thinking about all of the stuff that they could buy with it, thinking about all of the stuff that they could get. And when you get all of that stuff, and you say, is there happiness in this? And the answer is no. It's not. When you possess everything on the planet and you can still be empty. I know people like that. They've got tons of stuff, but they're empty inside. And here's the truth. If you focus on yourself, you will be empty. If you focus on others, you will be full. Jesus says, I created you for something bigger. I created you for something greater. You are not enough to give your life to. And a lot of you have figured this out. A lot of you have figured that out. For me, it was not enough to just go to church. When I got married and when we had Taylor, and then I looked at my wife and I looked at my family and I looked at my job and I said, this is not enough. There's a greater purpose. I was raised in church. I had gone to church when we went to college. I worked every job that you could imagine. I was in radio. I worked NASCAR races. I did stock car races. We did all of these things, and it was working all of those things. And we decided that we were going to come back to church. But going to church, showing up at 11 o'clock, sitting in a pew, and just going home, that wasn't enough for me. It wasn't enough. That was not enough. There had to be something more. And I remember so distinctly, Brother Greg Fields was our pastor, and he said, in February, we're going to have Baptist Men's Day. And I want some of you guys to come forward and share your testimony and speak. And I'm like, yes, that's me. That's great. Let's do this. And I'm looking around, and it's like, you're the only one excited about this. There's nobody else excited about this. And so then I realized that he had called me to preach. He had called me for that purpose. And it was bigger than me. Once you've discovered purpose, you can't just go to church anymore. Once you've shared the gospel with a young person, once you've led them to the believer's prayer and shared the baptism, there's nothing like it. It's not just coming to church anymore. You can't just come to church. Mike, you can't just come to church anymore. That ended in you a long time ago. It's more than just showing up and going back home. There's more to it than that. Purpose is always found just beyond the border of what's in it for me. Purpose is always found just beyond the border of what's in it for me. Just beyond your comfort zone. Just beyond your comfort zone. And Jesus says, come on. Jesus says, come on. I knew I could talk. That wasn't hard for me. I may not be the most perfect English, okay, and I may not be the greatest communicator that's ever lived, but I knew I could stand in front of people and talk. But when I looked at the price that there was going to be for pastoring, when I realized that there were going to be funerals, okay, when I realized, and he got those things out of my way, because my first funeral was 2 years before I surrendered to the call, and it was my great-grandmother, and I couldn't sit still. They said, do you think you? I said, absolutely. Nobody else knows her better than me. I don't want somebody standing up there that don't know her. I want to do it. So he got that out of my way. It's always one step beyond your comfort zone. It's always one step beyond of what's in it for me. Jesus says, come on. He called it the abundant life. He called it the abundant life. And here's the thing. The best thing that you can do for you has very little to do with you. The best thing that you can do for you has very little to do with you. It's really in your best interest not to be too interested in the things that interest you. All right? Let me say that again. It's really in your best interest not to be too interested in the things that interest you. Jesus says, trust me. Jesus says, trust me. Jesus said, say no to you so that you can say yes to something bigger and better and broader than you are. And that brings us back to this pesky little question. What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart? And here's another question. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? And here's another one. Who is doing something about it? Who is doing something about it, and what can you do to help them? See, many times you don't have to go out and start a new organization. You don't have to go out and start a whole new movement. Just when you see something, when God puts something on your heart that breaks your heart, that tears you apart, just look and see who's doing something about it. And then ask God, what can I do to join them in that work? You know, when I sit down and have a conversation with Jimmy Boone about the hungry people in Ohio County, he can't have that conversation with me without weeping. He cannot have that conversation with me without being moved to tears. Why? Because the hungry people of this county breaks his heart. The people that are hungry in this community breaks his heart. And when he sees it, he can't not do something about it. He has to do something about it. It moves him so deeply and so drastically that it breaks his heart. And I can't have a conversation with him unless it just tears him apart. And he's doing something about it. And if it breaks your heart, I bet you can join him in that effort. He'd be glad to have you. 15 years ago, the church that I grew up in was burned by fire. And I didn't know what to do. And so I made a phone call to Frankie Smith, and he gave me a man by the name of Audrey Emery. He said, call Audrey, because he is a part of an organization called Campers on Mission. So I called Audrey. And Audrey said, you need to call David Fuqua. He's our construction coordinator. And so I called David. And David came down. And David drove down, and we went down to the church, and he got out of the truck, and we walked up to the hole that was filled with ashes. And at that moment, at that time, it broke his heart. It broke his heart. He said, we're going to help you. And so on June the 1st of the year 2000, they brought 30-some campers. And we moved a whole army of campers onto that piece of property. And we hooked them all up, and they were all there and ready to go. And he said, we'll be here for 2 weeks. He said, we'll give you 2 weeks and see how much we can get done in 2 weeks. We already had a foundation, and we had the footer poured. We had the foundation, so we were going to try to get it up as far as we could. 3 months later, the building was up and roofed and siding, and the campers were still there. Why? It broke their heart. It broke their heart. They gave 2 weeks. They were willing to give 2 weeks, but God said, no, it's going to take more of your time than that. It's going to take a bigger sacrifice than that. You're going to have to give yourself to this because I know that it breaks your heart. And because it broke their heart, they gave as much as they could to it. And then 15 years later, when I got the call that David had passed, that David had gone to be with his Savior, I went to his wife, I went to his widow, and I said, thank you. Not because David was his ideal weight, not because David ate fat-free food, not because David exercised every day, not because David was out of debt, but because David gave his life as a sacrifice for something bigger than himself. Several years ago, I graduated with Stacy Cox. She's Stacy Boyd now. She looked around at several pregnant teenagers in our county and in our community and some of the needs of unwed mothers and some of those situations, and it broke her heart, and it moved her to start a ministry called Hope for Life that's here in our county, and today it exists, and she's not even there anymore. God called her to start that, but other people looked at that, and it broke their heart, and they joined together in that effort, and now her sister is the manager of it, and so many people have been helped because she said yes, and she was willing to make the sacrifice. How can you help? How can you help? What breaks your heart? In order to make the world a better place, you have to say no to you so that you can say yes to something that is bigger than yourself. And Jesus says, deny yourself, say no to you so that you can say yes to me. Because what happens when you see other people suffering? When you see other people suffering, you come alongside them and you begin to carry their burden. The Bible says to carry one another's burdens. When David Fuqua showed up at New Harmony, that wasn't his church that burned. He didn't know anything about it. But because I called him and because it was God's people, and because it was God's family, God said, carry their burdens. Come alongside them and carry their burdens. You may have plenty of food in your house. You may have plenty of food in your pantry. You may be overloaded with groceries. But there are other people that are out there that are hungry. There are other people out there that are suffering. And God says, come alongside them and carry one another's burdens. You may not be the parent. You may not be the parent of an unwed teenager who's pregnant. That may not be you. But come alongside them and let them experience God's love from you. And give up some of your time. Deny yourself to do something bigger and better. And here's why. Here's why you should come alongside and carry one another's burden. Because when God looked upon this world, our sin broke His heart. Our sin broke His heart. And His broken heart compelled Him to send His Son. It compelled Him to send His Son into this world to wade into our sin, to come alongside us, to carry our burden, and not just carry them, but carry them all the way to the cross and pay the ultimate price for them. And because of that, we can be free. We can be free and we can live for a greater purpose. We can live for a greater purpose. What breaks your heart? What breaks your heart and what are you going to do about it? Let me pray for you. Father, we thank you so much. We thank you that you've called us to more than what we are. We thank you that you've called us to a greater purpose. Father, we ask this morning that you just look upon our hearts. Speak to us, Lord. Help us to know what we're supposed to do. Father, when we ask the question, what breaks our hearts, creates a tension in us, causes us not to want to do because we realize it's going to cost us something. Realize that we're going to have to do something about that. So, Father, we pray that you'll just speak to us. Father, that we would see that living just for ourselves, when we come to the end of ourselves, there's nothing left but just us. If we try to save our life, we're going to lose it. But if we'll give our life away, you can do amazing things. Father, it's my prayer that each of us, when we come to the end of our lives, that there will be people that will want to line up to thank us for our contribution, for what we have done, for the difference that we've made. Father, I pray now that you would just speak to our heart over this next week as we continue to ponder this question, what breaks our heart? Father, later when we're prompted with the call to stand up and say, I will do this. I will do this. Father, I pray that you will have planted a seed, that you will have put a calling, that you would have given us, Father, greater purpose, Father. I pray now that you would guide us in this time of invitation, guide us in this time of reflection, and help us, Father. Help us to do all that we can to make a difference in someone's life. Father, today, maybe you want to make a huge difference in someone's life. Maybe today, for the first time, they've come to realize that you love them, that you created them, you brought them into this world, and you love them, and you desire a relationship with them. They realize that there needs to be more to their life. There needs to be a greater purpose to their life, and that begins with a relationship with you. I pray, Father, that you'll draw them to come. Father, you know how we need to respond. You know what we need to do. I pray now, Lord, that you'd guide us in this time of reflection. reflection and invitation. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.